Hi all, it's Nathan here from FBR Contracting. Today I've got an opportunity to conduct a review on a pretty exciting product that's about to hit the Australian market, and that product is the Wedgetail Industries MPR 308 Mod 2. So the rifle's in front of me just here, but for those who don't know, the MPR 308 is a pump action 308 rifle that will fit inside Category B, and therefore should be legal in most states in Australia for most recreational firearms owners to use as they see fit, which is a really exciting development, because pump actions that are highly functional are not necessarily something that is that common on the Australian market. So before I go into the review itself in any level of detail, Wedgetail Industries just asked me to clarify a couple of points up front in regards to the conduct of this review. So the first one is I'm not sponsored by Wedgetail Industries, and they don't provide me firearms for free. So I do have a couple of Wedgetail semi-automatic firearms, and I have dealt with their products pretty regularly. But as anyone who watches my channel for any amount of time at all will know, I'm a big fan of trying to support the Australian firearms industry. So that's predominantly the angle I come from there. But unfortunately for me, I don't get to keep this rifle. They've sent it out to me to test, evaluate, see if I can make it not work, and basically really torture test this rifle to sort of see how it goes under what would be considered fairly harsh field shooting conditions. So I've certainly done that, and I'll talk to some detail around what that looks like further on as we go into the video. In terms of my context and my background from shooting, so I run a conservation and land management business, FBR Contracting. I do a lot of shooting, ground-based shooting, aerial shooting, predominantly conservation-based programs, but all fairly high volume. So, and I'm ex-military, so I know my way around firearms relatively well. And particularly in the last few years, I've done a lot of work around AR-10 style platforms, which is an interesting thing to bring up in this video, because the Wedgetail MPR is nothing like an AR-10. It has a completely different operating system, so it is a completely manually operated pump action, which is, again, brings it straight back into Cat B, and there is no physical way this firearm could possibly be turned into anything semi-automatic. It doesn't have a gas system and has a completely different arrangement through the rear of the firearm, which just frankly would not support AR-10 components. So that's of interest. So the reason the firearm is set up the way it is here now, before I go into a bit of a description, I've just used this firearm for 3.5 weeks up on a conservation program up in northern Cape York. So you can probably see, I don't know if the video will pick it up, but she's got a little bit of mud on her. I haven't cleaned it at all since I've been up there, apart from wiping a little bit of oil over the bolt just to get rid of any nastiness caused by being in the rain, which happens fairly frequently. I've put a heap of ammunition through this gun. On that job it was all 150 grain Winchester power point, which all performed really well, and I humanely destroyed a significant number of animals with it. So I've had quite a bit of experience in the field with this gun, shooting at varying ranges under varying conditions, targeting feral animals. So it's been used really successfully on feral pigs, wild dogs and feral cats up on that program, in addition to the range work that I did before I went on the program to make sure that the firearm was suitable in terms of accuracy, zero, and aligning the thermal equipment, which fits really well. So there's a little bit of upfront context on the rifle and where I'm coming from. So without any further sort of interruptions, we'll get into the rifle itself. So as you can see here, the rifle has no magazine on it at the moment, and it is fully unloaded and safe. So first up, it looks a lot like a AR-10 style blueprint, which is a good thing because that's all about ergonomics. So essentially you can see it has a similar look to some of those firearms, which is probably going to be scary for some of Australia's more nanny states, but that is what it is, and unfortunately that's the world we live in. However, it is a really, really ergonomic and functional platform. So I'll start at the front. At the moment it's got a Wedgetail blast jacket on it, and underneath that blast jacket we have the Wedgetail Inox muzzle brake. So again, you can see a fair bit of carbon, etc. on that brake, because I haven't cleaned it at all. since I already did the last job. You don't have to have this setup on the front, but honestly, if you're going to buy one of these, just go there. Like the setup is excellent. You get the full benefit of the recoil reduction and the accuracy of running a muzzle brake, but with the blast jacket over the top of it, again that's a hollow tube, you don't get the noise back on your ears, and it's for the little bit of weight penalty you get forward on the rifle. It's definitely a thing that is worth having. So this particular rifle has an 18-inch barrel on it, and as you can see, it then has the forend, which is typical sort of hex mod AR style arrangement, but with some pretty tricky slide cutout. So you can see slide cutout on the side, underneath, and again on the other side, and that's so that your pump or shuttle, as Wedgetail are calling it, can operate fairly freely. So the shuttle itself is forward there. You don't have to have the foregrip arrangement on there. There's something that can be supplied with these rifles if that's your preference. You could have nothing on there. You could have the angular ones. You can put whatever you want on one of these, which is a good thing and kind of the whole point of a modular rifle like this. Moving rearwards, you've got the essentially the receiver of the action bolt group, which I'm not going to pull apart during this review, which is a little bit different to how typically you might think these things work. Your mag well, which is a typical AR style mag well, and that takes PMags. So the rifles will come with a 10-round PMag, but any PMag will fit in these, which is again a good thing from the point of view of modularity and flexibility when you're operating these firearms. Mag release on the side here. Okay, safety catch is here, and typical safe and fire, very similar to what you'd find on any style of AR. Trigger, nothing really too exciting to talk about there. And then as you move back through the rear of the rifle is where things get a little bit exciting. So a lot of pump actions are just straight manual operation. There's a few hybrids out there at the moment. There's some stuff that's spring assist in terms of straight pulls. What's really exciting about this rifle is that it's a manually operated pump action, but it does have a skinny tube that goes back into the buffer here and has spring pressure on it, so that when you cycle the action, there is a little bit of pressure on there that assists the pump or shuttle in moving forward nice and freely. So you can do that literally with one finger, let it go, and the firearm will go back into battery. So what this does, it just makes the bringing the firearm into battery with a live round and or reloading when you're shooting to be a very smooth operation, which is a very cool feature of this rifle, and certainly not something I've seen on other types of firearms elsewhere. From a personal perspective, I have historically hated pump actions. So, through my sort of formative years working with firearms, Remington 7600s was sort of the only thing out there in terms of pump actions on the market. And I've always just found them to be horrible, and they've just put me off, frankly. So I was a little bit surprised when I got this Wedgetail in the mail to sort of feel the system and to see how smooth that is. And certainly I'll be putting up some videos later which will show both how effective this is with multiple types of ammunition in terms of its ability to bring those rounds effectively into battery in the chamber. And some thermal videos of actually shooting this in the field on live animals to, again, just show the fit for purpose and why this firearm is designed the way that it is. In terms of the furniture on it, it's all Magpul, which is good because it's quality gear. So MOE grips, and I think this is the STR or similar buttstock, or SL5, what's written on it here. So very ergonomic and pretty much similar to what's going to come on the production gun. So that's probably a key point to talk about at this stage. So what I have here is the prototype MPR Mod 2. Okay, this isn't going to be the production gun. It's very, very similar, but there are a couple of fundamental differences. So on the production gun, instead of having an 18-inch barrel, you're going to have a 16-inch barrel. You're going to find that you have a couple of options with the forend. You can have a short forend, or it may come with a longer forend if you request that, which will have that little bit of a protrusion forward of the shuttle there. That may be important to you if you're using something like a hog saddle or a bog pod or something like that, where you need to rest the firearm in front of the shuttle so that you can still then operate the firearm off a steady rest. So that's a feature there. Obviously you can't really put anything in this space here because that's where the shuttle goes. The other things that will come on the production gun are pretty much what you see here. So it'll be a custom trigger on it. So when I say custom, we're talking a factory built, but probably a two-stage trigger, which will be very nice to utilise, and that's certainly what's on most of the other Wedgetail products. Okay, and the furniture, etc., through the rifle will be pretty much the same, aside from that barrel difference. So from my perspective, that is certainly a good thing to hear in terms of the form and function of these rifles. So what I'm going to do shortly is commence a bit of a torch test here on the range, just so you guys can see how the firearm functions with live rounds. So I'm going to put about 30 rounds of just FMJ ammunition straight into a dirt bank up here, and the whole purpose of doing that is just to watch the firearm function and get it hot. So typically when these sorts of firearms that rely on a bolt that's rotary start to fail is when they get hot, they get dirty, and then they fail to extract and you start having issues with them. So if you're going to get a firearm to the point where it's going to fail, it's going to be with the ammunition I'm using today to get it hot, which is 150 grain federal FMJ. So again, great ammunition to make your gun stuff up, quite high pressure, it'll get it nice and hot. From there, what I'm going to do, I've got a bunch of ammunition I'll show you shortly, and we're going to just randomly put different ammunition in different magazines, and then we're going to cycle it through it. So there'll be a mix of 130 federal, 135 OSA, numerous different brands of 150 grain ammunition. So I've got some Remington Core-Lock, some Fed 150s, some Winchester Power Points, some Seiko Game Heads, which I'll put through. I believe there's some 168 grain ammunition there, and then I've got some real heavy 180 grain Woodley factory ammo by Winchester, which has got a really long bearing surface on it. So we're going to cycle all of that through the gun and see how it goes. So that'll give us a fairly good indication of just how reliable this firearm is. And then I'll do a couple of sequences of just general shooting with it, so you can see the functionality in terms of how this firearm works in the types of scenarios you might use it in the field. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the applications where a firearm like this is going to fit for the Australian user. Would that be a professional user, would that be a primary producer, or whether that be a recreational firearms enthusiast who's using this for any range of activities, from hunting to general range work, perhaps shooting free gun, any of those types of things. And then I'll offer my opinion on the rifle at the back end of all of that. So stay tuned, we'll get into the range phase. So guys, as discussed, what I'm going to do now, I've got 3 10-round P-mags here, and they're loaded with the American Eagle 150 grain full metal jacket ammunition. What we're going to do is just pump these mags through relatively quickly, a little bit steady, not to annoy the neighbours too much, just to get a bit of a feel for getting the weapon hot. It's already dirty, as I said before, so I haven't cleaned this. It's probably had 80 to 100 rounds through it, so it's a little bit dirty, but we'll just sort of see how that goes. We'll get it nice and hot, and then we'll switch over and try the different types of ammunition on the way through. So guys, what you can see there is a different array of ammunition. So I've actually put about 50 rounds of FMJ through the rifle, another box in the front of the quad bike there, so that I've brought down, so that's good. That barrel is very, very hot. I definitely don't want to put my fingers on that. And this is some of the other ammunition I'll just run through now. So you've got some 135 OSA, some 150 PMC bronze line, 150 Fed, 150 core locked, 180 Woodley, and some 130 Fed there as well. And we're just going to put that through a single mag, again, just to see what the consistency on this firearm is like with different types of ammunition. So guys, as I said before, if you're going to get a firearm to fail, how you're going to get it to fail is by running it really hot, which it certainly is now after around 50 rounds of FMJ, even to the point where the receiver's quite warm. And then I've got 10 rounds here of just completely different styles of ammunition, as I said earlier. So we're just going to put that through now into a dirt bank up here and just make sure it all feeds and functions as per what you'd hope it would for a high quality firearm. The battery, and away we go. Probably see there we have a very hot rifle, so plenty of smoke coming out of the chamber. It's clear, and that's even hot to touch underneath all through here. So yeah, there we have it. So just for context on this firearm too, one of the other points I'd like to make is around the efficiency of the action and how quickly you can cycle it. So this is a relatively fast Cat B firearm. It's certainly on par with the other manually operated styles of firearms that are out there. And in some respects I'd say it's a little bit faster, which is based on hand position. And what I mean is one of the key issues when you're shooting is ensuring that you don't break your position so that you can have rapid follow-up shots. And rapid follow-up shots are an important factor in the hunting field or when you're conducting pest control, because it's all about humane destruction of the animals that are out there and ensuring that nothing is left to suffer. So if your first shot is a little bit off, or you've hit some vegetation, etc., and you need that fast follow-up, that's where a firearm like this can come in to assist in that space. It's not there about the ability to have a big yippee on the range and get a heap of rounds down fast. You can do that if you want to burn your barrel, but that's not really what these firearms are about. It's about that humane destruction component and the efficiency of cycling and not having to break your position. So a lot of other firearms, you'll have the firearm in the shoulder and you'll have to move a hand off the firearm somewhere to manually operate it. So whether that's a straight pull on the left side, whether that's a bolt action, with a 10 round mag, as many of the options that are out there. One of the benefits of this style of pump action is there's none of that braking position. So you can maintain your sight picture, looking through for that follow-up shot to observe where the feral animal or hunted animal is, and then you can maintain your position and cycle the action, okay, which is a really important factor. And obviously you want to make sure the firearm goes into battery properly, which means that the bolt closes on a live round so that you're able to then fire. So I'll just do a quick practical demonstration now of how that works with this type of firearm. So I've got 3 rounds in the magazine. There's a 180 grain Woodley, 130 grain Federal, and a 150 grain Federal. Again, just so we're giving it an opportunity to trip up under fast fire conditions. But we'll just see how that goes. And again, I'm just engaging straight down range at a bit of heat I can see there on a dirt bank with the thermal unit, just to demonstrate that fast follow-up shot, potentially on a wounded animal, etc., to ensure that we're compliant with humanely destroying animals. Okay, so we have the first round in battery. We've just observed an animal. So as you can see there, that fast follow-up shooting under that type of scenario, this is quite quick and is probably a little bit quicker than most of the bolt actions or straight pulls in that environment, and certainly commensurate potentially with the other pump actions. Not qualified to comment on those as I haven't used a lot of the newer other pump actions on the market, but I'd be pleasantly surprised if they're as smooth as this one. So just a couple of thoughts there on the range session. Gee, that's still pretty warm. Rifle's clear at the moment, and obviously no mag on, so it's all safe. It functions very, very well for any type of rifle, but there is not many rifles that fit inside the manually operated side of things that you can put 60 rounds that quickly through without getting the firearm to the point where there will be failures. So I would say that the rifle didn't really like the 150 grain FMJ. You'd feel it was probably a little bit tighter than some of the other factory options there, but it cycled fine, which is a testament to the operating system on this firearm, which is really good. In terms of accuracy testing, I'm not going to go into detail on that in this review, and the simple reason is I've obviously still got a thermal unit mounted on the rifle, and I'll be using this rifle on the next job. And of interest, I'm not going to clean it before I go on the next job. I'm going to take it dirty and do a little bit more evaluation for myself in the field to determine whether some of these will be coming into the FDR battery. And at the moment, I've got to say they probably will be. I'm certainly pretty impressed with the way this firearm is operated over the preceding 4 weeks in the field environment. And certainly on the range here today and during testing previously when zeroing, etc., it proved to me that it was more than capable of significant accuracy. So this has been shot and grouped at 100 metres, and again the limiting factor on that for the testing that I've done on it is the fact that it's running a thermal unit at the moment, so it's shooting a hot 6-inch gong at 100 metres, and it's very hard to measure a group size of clustered paint, but essentially it grouped very well for any type of rifle, but certainly I was impressed by the grouping, and it didn't let me down in the field environment. So a couple of closing comments for the range phase before we wrap up the review on this firearm. So where does this fit in Australia? So there's probably going to be those detractors out there and the antis who are going to say, oh great, we've got another black gun, looks like an AR, here we go, welcome to the firearms fans, etc., etc. And that really is not what this type of firearm is about. It's not out there as some rapid fire machine at all. This firearm is highly suitable to the individual conducting pest control on the land. It's highly suitable to the recreational hunter providing support to primary producers and landholders. It's highly suitable for people like myself who are going to run thermal units on it and use it for accurate pest control in selected areas. It's useful for me potentially as a backup rifle for aerial shooting operations. I can see all sorts of application for sporting shooting with this firearm, including 3-gun competition and a range of other areas on the range. So it's a pretty versatile platform in terms of the things you would be able to do with a rifle like this. And again, probably one of those key factors just to get out there, if you're one of those people that just loves the whole AR thing and you're thinking there might be a way to adapt this, put a gas system in it, whatever, and turn it into some form of semi-automatic rifle, it's physically not possible. There is literally no way you can do that. There's a solid tube that runs through the top of the firearm, which is what operates the bolt of the shuttle here, and the dimensions, etc., for everything else in the back of the firearm are just not the same as any other type of AR semi-automatic platform out there. It's all proprietary stuff that's been patented by Wedgetail Industries. So yeah, a couple of points there. Anyway, yeah, so far pretty impressed by the firearm. I'll give some closing remarks when I get back up to the office. So guys, some closing remarks and final thoughts on the Wedgetail Industries MPR 308 Winchester Mod 2. I guess the first comment I'd make is it's fantastic to see another quality Australian built firearm on the market, and I can't emphasise the Australian built part of that too much. It's really good to see a whole bunch of Australian manufacturers out there at the moment who are putting new products on the market, because honestly, if we don't support our industry will go away, and certainly no exception with the Wedgetail MPR that's being put out here. One of the other points I'd like to make too is, from my perspective, this is a review of the rifle. There's going to be a bunch of questions I know that'll come up in the comments relating to price point, availabilities, that type of thing. And I'd certainly say just speak to Wedgetail Industries. So I'll put the contact details there in the notes on the video, so you've got some details there you can go through. I think the price point on this rifle is going to be in that sort of between 3.5 and 4K bracket, depending on the furniture fit out that goes on the firearm. And certainly from my perspective, I would say that is very good value for money in terms of the quality of the build of this rifle. As I've said throughout the review, it's a well put together firearm. The system on it is essentially proprietary with the way that works. It is very smooth to operate. It has good form, good function, which I certainly appreciate. And as with any of the AR platforms or other designs that are out there that are similar in nature, this sort of blueprint is very ergonomic to shoot. So it promotes accurate shooting, it promotes ethical shooting, and it fits in a broad range of niches because of that. I guess the key point about this firearm too, there are a number of other styles of firearms out there at the moment in various smaller calibers, but it's a lot harder to make firearms that have effective function when you get to the medium-sized cartridges on a pump action on a rotary bolt. And so all these AR style bolts, regardless of what modifications they have, they still operate the same way, which is that they have to lock in a rotary sense inside the chamber, and that does pose some unique engineering issues to do with not having the firearm lock up and making sure it both feeds and ejects smoothly, which this one certainly does. So I think some credit is due there to Wedgetail Industries for coming up with a design that doesn't have a lot of the inherent flaws that are there with that rotary bolt system when operating on mid-sized cartridges. As I said, it's a lot easier to design a cartridge in the 223, 300 blackout, that type of thing, that fits in a different space there. So one of the other questions that I suspect I'm going to be asked relatively regularly is, what is my honest opinion on the rifle, the firearm, and would I see myself potentially utilising one of these? So I guess up front, this is a quality rifle. I like it. I like the way it feels in the hand. It's very solid. I'm not going to quote weights, etc., because this is the prototype gun. There'll be some differences there with the production gun, which will be a little bit lighter again. But certainly even this prototype, it's not a weighty rifle. So it's what I would call medium weight. To be around that sort of between 3 and 4 kilo bracket. Certainly very easy to carry, hold, shoot, etc., etc. For me, I definitely can see myself getting hold of 1 or 2 of these in the future. It fits really well with the thermal on it. So regardless of what type of thermal you're running, having the full length rail there so you can mount a thermal sighting system on it for effective pest control is great. Another potential use that I'd see for this firearm is there are some states, WA for example, and other areas where you simply can't use Cat D firearms for aerial control and you have to use a Cat B firearm. And that's where something like this would really fill that niche quite nicely for me. Even as a backup gun, so if something's gone wrong with the semi-automatic gas operated guns on a job, then certainly this would be a good backup option. So look, if you're in the market for something that is certainly a good handling rifle, very ergonomic, very safe, multi-purpose in terms of its ability to be used for range shooting, for pest control, for hunting, particularly in those types of scenarios where you might be dealing with mobs of feral pests like pigs. This is a very suitable firearm for those purposes. Again, I think Wedgetail have done a good job with engineering on this rifle. The integrals on the bolt and how that works with a completely redesigned buffer that is absolutely nothing like an AR internally is fantastic, and it's just enhanced the overall form and function of the firearm itself. So if you do have any questions that I can answer, again, if it's marketing style stuff around options or price or anything like that, probably not worth asking me, just contact Wedgetail directly. But if you would like any other specific thoughts on the firearm or how things work, by all means leave those questions in the comments and I'll answer where I can. Thanks for watching, and yeah, look forward to doing some more reviews in the future. Cheers.